This video is brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino.
On tonight's Cover One Buffalo podcast, we will commiserate and vent on our frustration of losing our beloved Matt Milano to a bicep injury and talk about what that means. But in order to talk about that, I'm joined by my friend Joe Marino. But first, our guys, Handsome Jack.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL. Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, and for the second week in a row, I am without my wonderful, handsome co-host and partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. But normally we make you wait for the William Matar Here to Help segment, but we figured what better way to have someone here to help than to jump right into it with our man, Joe Marino. Joe Marino is here to help. Joe, how we doing?
I'm doing well, Greg. I'm not sure that I can help the Buffalo Bills in playing linebacker.
We talked about it pre-show. I was trying to stretch my hammies.
Right. Yeah. And look, I don't think either one of us, Greg, are going to be cut out to be able to do this. You know, I think the days of those 3-4 thumpers are gone, and that was probably my best chance. And so, crappy news, man. And we had planned on doing this before. Like, we weren't going to come on and talk about Matt Milano not being around for the season. So big pivot here.
Yeah. We had a whole show rundown ready that's now gone mostly out the window, but you know, it's the topic of the day, and rightfully, like, this was something that a lot of us had been very much looking forward to. We saw the step forward from Terrell Bernard last year, the handful of games that the two of them played together, I think 5 of them. And now, hey, we all know, you know, what we project may have happened if we had Milano and Bernard healthy in that playoff game, and what that meant to look forward to this year. So just to catch everybody up, for anyone who unfortunately is learning this from listening to me right now, Matt Milano was diagnosed with a torn bicep tendon. It, you know, from what we've heard, it's maybe not a complete tear, but a very significant tear, one that will require surgery, one that will require a significant amount of recovery. We've heard some of the, you know, injury experts online, guys like Dr. Chow. I know he was on with Anna Benini and Sal Marana talking about the fact that, you know, a 4-month recovery, you know, into December or maybe even late November is in play. I've heard other folks around the, you know, Banged Up Bills, Kyle Trimble, who helps both of us, and the thigh doctor gentleman, those guys all kind of talk about the same things. So I'll cling to that as some silver lining of a possibility. And maybe we'll get into that later. But my first question to you is, how 1-to-1 of a next step and the next man up mentality we hear not only from the Bills but throughout the NFL is it from Matt Milano to Dorian Williams? Or do you think this opens up more so? You know, last year we saw what they did with the strategy around Terrell Dotson. We knew he was very capable coming downhill, very capable in the run game, but in the obvious pass sets, we brought in Taylor Rapp, and Jordan Poyer came up and played dime linebacker. Do you see this as, hey, Matt Milano's out, Dorian Williams is in, we're still rocking with 200% snap linebackers? Or do you think this opens up all of the options per se?
I'm sure the Bills would love for Dorian Williams to just play all the snaps that they had in mind for Matt Milano. I think the concern there is I just don't feel like Dorian Williams' strengths and weaknesses line up for that to work. And maybe I'm wrong, and the Bills have almost a month to kind of tinker with stuff and figure out what they want to do before they host the Arizona Cardinals to open the season. But the challenge with Dorian Williams is that I really like his ability to play downhill and defend the run and blitz, and he's fast and physical, and he's, you can just sense the urgency that he plays with, and you love that. The problem is that he just isn't very comfortable dropping into coverage, and whether it's being able to not vacate space that you're responsible for due to play fakes, or just not a very natural feel about the way that he drops into zone coverage. And, you play zone coverage, you get to your landmarks, you got to be able to squeeze routes and condense and close and understand route combinations. And he's kind of a drifter. He's a guy that just kind of gets to his landmark, and that's about it, man. And sometimes he just keeps on drifting. And so just not a very savvy player in terms of coverage. And I think, unfortunately, the easiest thing for NFL offenses to do is to exploit that in a defense. And I get nervous about that quite a bit. And so if Dorian Williams is not able to show growth in coverage, I think the Bills will have to consider a different plan for those long and late downs. NFL offensive coordinators, they do something called Where's Waldo? And they try to figure out who's the guy, right? Who's the guy that you want to go and attack? And every time Dorian Williams has been on the field in a regular season game, whether that was the Bucs game last year or the Patriots game last year, you just saw too many issues with him not understanding his coverage responsibilities, and those offensive coordinators just absolutely exploiting that. And so that's where you get nervous. And so does this open the opportunity for the Bills to get creative with long and late downs? So you look at that, and maybe there's a path. I don't know what it would look like, because the two guys you would need, Mike Edwards, Cole Bishop, those guys are also hurt right now. So that doesn't help. I wonder, Greg, how much opportunity a guy like Deion Jones gets in this conversation. I know Deion Jones has not really been Deion Jones over the last couple of years, but what's encouraging to me about him is what's derailed his career is a shoulder injury. It's not like a leg thing or a back thing. It's a shoulder. And I thought he had his best moments in a couple of years late in the season last year for Carolina. And I think he's caught my eye quite a bit in the training camp practices that I've been able to attend and the preseason game. I think he looks okay to me. And so maybe your upside play is Dorian Williams. And I think we would all love for the big silver lining, the story that comes out of this is that this was Dorian Williams' opportunity. He met the moment. Now the Bills have this young, dynamic pair of linebackers in Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams for a long, long time. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I think that's all what we're rooting for. But I think it just depends on what the appetite is for this coaching staff to incorporate some type of unique package to help with some of the deficiencies if Dorian Williams cannot come along in coverage.
It's funny. So I had the opportunity to jump on with Gene Battaglia and the guys over in 95.7 The Fan earlier today. And I made a similar comment in that they were asking me, hey, who could they be looking at? And I said, don't get me wrong. If Joe Shane wants to send us Bobby Okereke, I'll figure out a way to make it work. But I don't anticipate there's any big transactions happening. And if you go out there on the free agent wire, you're going to see some names you recognize, because people are going to recognize Shaq Leonard. Some people might think of it as Darius Leonard, but whatever.
Right.
Zach Cunningham, Quan Alexander. There are some names out there that people go, oh, we should go get that guy. And I would tell you, we have two guys on our roster now that were at the top of my wish list at one point when we were going through offseason analysis. Nicholas Morrow was a guy that I had presented as a Matt Milano replacement option. It was 4 years ago. It was in the offseason in 2020. Right. And it was going through like, hey, if we can't afford him, if we have to move on, this is a guy who can play coverage in the NFL and has that ability. And there was a point where Deion Jones was a guy that I described as the prototypical modern NFL linebacker. This was before the explosion of Fred Warner and seeing his full capabilities, and early in the Bobby Wagner, starring as kind of the guy. I loved seeing Deion Jones flying around the field as a 230-pound linebacker, being able to do everything, but not really losing much coming up in force and coming up going downhill. He was able to move in coverage without losing anything in the hole and being able to stop the run. And so, I said that in the sense of like, hey, we already have two guys that have name recognition and name value that we're still clinging to what they could be. I don't need to add Zach Cunningham or Quan Alexander to that mix to hope that they also have something they used to have. And I like that approach. I hadn't really thought about the Deion Jones from a health standpoint. You assume that as they age, it's immediately slowing down. But I think that it would be, we're on the same page that Dorian Williams is the number one, probably number one and number two, plan A and plan B.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't work in that sense, I almost wonder, is a Cole Bishop, Deion Jones platoon more practical than a Dorian Williams, Cole Bishop platoon, where, hey, at least we know this is a guy who can diagnose early downs, and that, do we have to worry about early down passes, and does he still have the same sideline to sideline speed? We'll deal with that. But when we know it's an obvious passing down, we get that third safety in, and whether it's Edwards early on and Bishop later, whatever it might be, maybe that's the alternative or the backup plan, is that maybe it's, hey, Dorian Williams just isn't ready to be anything other than a third linebacker. We need it to be Deion Jones, and then we protect him like we protected Terrell Dodson.
Certainly a possibility. My galaxy brain outside move is Shaq Thompson. And I don't know why Carolina would trade him. He's 30 and they're a young team, right? They're kind of retooling in a lot of ways. And so I think about Shaq Thompson as a 2015 first round pick when Brandon Beane was the assistant general manager for Carolina. Of course, Sean McDermott, the defensive coordinator. They had 2 years of overlap. I don't know what Carolina's appetite. That's what's hard, right? Like at this point when everyone's 0-0 and hope springs eternal, you're not lining up to get rid of your projected starters. But that's kind of my galaxy brain if there is somebody outside, because I agree with you. Like, do you really need to compound your issues with adding a Leonard or a Cunningham or a Quan Alexander? I don't know. I don't think that really changes much. So if that's,
I would assume if those guys had an awful lot left in the tank, they'd be on a roster right now.
Right. There's going to be attrition across the league. They'll get their just like they've been for the last several years. Like random middle of the season, got to have a player. Okay, come on down. It's your turn.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting, and the difference, some of the names obviously that get thrown out there are unrealistic. Shaq Thompson, you're talking about one that's not prohibitive for either team. The Panthers would only take on $1 million in dead cap this year and only kick a little bit into next year. And whoever takes on that deal, the Bills would only take on $2.1 million. He's also a player that I don't think is so prominent that should the silver lining scenario with Matt Milano's return in December. I know some people look, you have the bye week and then 6 regular season games after that. That's an awful nice lead up. Or even if it's the full 4 months into December, you're still talking like 3 regular season games and then the playoffs. He's not so prominent of a player that couldn't work together in a scenario, but he's also good enough that maybe that becomes a bit of a, an option to mix in. I've talked with others on, we just have such a default that this is a base nickel 5 DB minimum defense no matter what. And of course it has been, like, there's reason people think of it that way, but we've never had the linebacking depth to ever push that. Like, we've never had someone who is of even remotely similar or equal talent to Taron Johnson to make them debate, like, would we create an overhang, bigger, all the different terms that teams use for that role. Would we have our own star if it was a different guy? We've never had that. I'd love to be in a position where all of a sudden we're like, hey, we got to figure out a way to get Shaq Thompson on the field. Right. So I love that your galaxy brain pleases me. I had to immediately, while we're talking, Shaq Thompson contracted.
Maybe sure that added up, brother. There we go.
You know how my brain works.
The Greg Tompsett validation on a transaction idea is always very meaningful to me. So thank you.
And that one is one that is not galaxy brain from either side. Some of the times there are ones where I tell people, I'm like, well, yeah, the Bills would want to do that, but why in the world would the other team want to eat that insane dead cap? This is one where it makes sense for both sides. Like you said, a 30-year-old linebacker is not part of the long-term plans for the Carolina Panthers and any of the most optimistic timelines of where they plan to get to. I think that's something that we can easily see as a possibility. So we'll see where that goes. I do think by far the most likely is a Dorian Williams plan A with a Deion Jones third safety platoon backup plan B, and we'll just see where it goes. So I'll lead into that here, as obviously, what did you see in the limited snaps Dorian Williams did play in the Bears, and what are you going to be watching for here versus the Steelers?
Well, I think Dorian Williams has shown growth in some areas, and it is his ability to play downhill. I think he's a good run defender, and I certainly like the idea of him being able to blitz from time to time, and I think he had a good rep of doing that against the Bears. He's also like a very capable man coverage player. Like if you could just say, hey, cover that guy, he can do it, right? That's the thing that's exciting about Dorian Williams is he's got size and athleticism. He's got in big time. And so you don't feel like there's any physical deficiency. So that means that anything that he needs to be able to improve upon is all mental. And you'd like to think that he can develop in that capacity. But you also saw, the play action to Kmet, he sucks up hard and pretty much just, Kmet had 5 yards of space, before Dorian Williams could turn around. You think about that. One of my favorite play of Caleb Williams in the entire game was the 3rd and 12 completion to DJ Moore. And because for Caleb Williams specifically, that he hung in the pocket, took an extra hitch and stayed on schedule, which is kind of my concern with Caleb Williams. Well, the reason that DJ Moore was able to uncover is because Dorian Williams got to his landmark and didn't stay there. He just kept on drifting and started covering grass, and instead of being where he's supposed to be, which was where DJ Moore was. So that's the things that I saw from Dorian Williams, and obviously he's under the microscope in a big way coming up here against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Saturday night. You got to think he needs reps. One thing that I've learned about, we don't know what Sean McDermott's plan is for his starters, but what I've learned is that he pretty much follows Andy Reid in a lot of ways. Andy Reid announced already that they're going to play the first half. That would not surprise me if the starters played the first half against the Steelers, which would create a good amount of reps for Dorian Williams, and that we're going to be watching them very closely.
Yeah, it obviously makes sense, and the linebacking position is going to be the dominant topic, and is what everyone's first priority is going to be staring at. But let's step back for a minute, because there are 52 other players that'll be on this roster, and 89 other gentlemen that are vying for those positions outside of Dorian Williams. So as we look into maybe some of those transitions from the Bears game into this Steelers game, who's maybe somebody that we'll start on the more constructive feedback side and then finish positive. Who's somebody that maybe didn't have as good of a game against the Bears that you're looking, hey, this guy needs to step up here because he had a little expectation from you coming in, and now you need to see a little bit more in this next game?
The name that pops for me, Greg, is Keon Coleman. And not necessarily, I don't think Keon Coleman played bad. I thought he did a good job with his clear out routes, had to push some verticals, did some mesh stuff to clear out space. He also had the catch, right, which was 3rd and 6, and had off zone coverage and snapped it off and had presented a very available target with a lot of space and got the first down. But what really stands out to me is the 2 red zone reps that he had, where the Bills isolated him up and asked him to win a route and get open. In neither case, he was able to do it. Once he had outside leverage and had to separate inside, he gives a hezzy step and really wasn't able to play with enough physicality to break through the contact that came when the corner condensed. Otherwise, he'd have been free, wide open in the back line of the end zone, and he's going to score a touchdown, and everyone's going to go crazy, right? His first game in Highmark Stadium. The other one was the kind of the skinny post, and Jalen Johnson just kind of plastered him in coverage. He couldn't even find space to get his foot in the ground.
Johnson ran the route for him.
Right. So you know what I mean? But that's the thing with Keon is, like, can you create that space for yourself? I understand that he's going to win in different ways than a Diggs or a Beasley or a John Brown or an Emmanuel Sanders. It's going to be a lot of using his intelligence, winning leverage battles. He's very athletic. And so, being able to lean into that to create some space. But, I want to see him be able to do that in some different ways. And I think these X snaps are wide open. I think Mack Hollins is going to get a lot of them, and I don't know how people are going to respond to that, but I think he's going to play a ton, and I think that Keon's going to get his chances. But like Keon's chances are going to come from delivering in those moments, and so far he's 0 for 2. And so how does that shift? Does it get better? Does it get worse? We'll find out. So I'm obviously very anxious to continue to monitor his route running and how he fits into this offense, because I've been so encouraged by the amount of trust that Josh Allen has in Keon Coleman during training camp practices. Like, I love that, but it has to translate to games or else Josh ain't going to throw him the ball.
Yeah, it's something where I know you always do a great job each offseason in your kind of projections on snaps, on targets, on where those things go. And I kind of have it in my head that 250% number is where I'm at, because I do think that with a healthy Dawson Knox, I think that a 50% 12 personnel is in play. I think that we're going to see a healthy chunk there. You and I talked last offseason on the different combinations that we could see both Knox and Kincaid play a huge amount and share it back and forth. Obviously, I think we all expect Kincaid to play even more this year and be off the field very, very infrequently. So that 250 to maybe 270%, where there'll be two receivers on the field the vast majority of the time. Some obviously jumbo sets and the short yardage things, but a pretty small percentage there. And then another third receiver 50% of the time, maybe 60. I don't think it would even push 70. So now you're talking, a lot of people would be thinking, oh, well, that's easy. There's 3 of them. It splits into, 80, 90% each. But as you bring it up, I think it splits. I don't know if it's 4 ways equally, but maybe equally 4 ways, and that we could see Mack Hollins, Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, and Khalil Shakir playing 60 to 70% snaps each. And it might be a little bit into the season where we see one of those guys really take a hold. I don't think we see anyone initially play the Gabe Davis number of snaps. And we all saw, Stephon Diggs was even a 80% guy. So I think that combination, I think Mack Hollins is right there and maybe an equal share with the other 3. And I think some people will be surprised to hear that.
It's probably game plan specific too, right? Because
for
as much variety as the Bills do have, like there, you think about, I think there is more variety. What I'm trying to say is there's more variety than I think that most people think that exists within those X receiver roles. Like, Mack Hollins is a very good vertical player. He's a very good blocker. There's going to be times where you want to lean into that. For Keon Coleman, like, I think if it's a game where you want to get a lot of RPO stuff going, having him run glance routes, and I think that's where he can really provide value. MVS is the vertical, the field stretcher. Maybe there's games where you want to lean into that. And so I think there's some contingencies here that, like, week to week, depending on how they want to attack the defense, you could see those snaps fluctuate unless somebody just absolutely takes hold of it. And you're like, he's got to play all the time.
And I do think that it's very plausible that both Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir could take a stronger role there, but neither of them are going to all of a sudden become a dominant X receiver. Like, there are times where you can work around there. That's one of the benefits of the condensed sets. When you have condensed sets, you don't have a traditional outside boundary guy sitting there that's doing that. Everybody's in those little wing positions and just off a tight end or even hidden inside. Like, you can mess around a lot in that way, where you can have sets where Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir, and Curtis Samuel are the 4 guys on the field, and no one is playing a traditional X in any sense. So there are creative ways to hide that. And I don't think it's an accident that we're seeing so much about the condensed sets here, because it gives more of that flexibility to do that. But when they do go in those traditional ones, I agree. I think Mack Hollins is a part of that puzzle for sure.
Yeah, excited to see how he does. I mean, he's always been such a tantalizing guy. And, like, on one hand, you're excited about him, and then you're like, well, why is he on his 5th team, like, in as many years? There's so many interesting dynamics with him.
Yeah. And sorry, we'll go down to Mack Hollins rabbit hole here. You add into there, he's not on his 5th team in the way that some of these other players are kicking around, where Marquez Valdes-Scantling, we can point to why he's now on
Mhm.
his third team. Chase Claypool, we can now point to why he's now looking for his fifth team. Anybody who wasn't aware, he was released on a injury settlement earlier today. There are guys where we know why they're in that spot. Mack Hollins has been a captain on the last 3 teams that he's been on. He's been a captain on each of the last 3 teams, is universally spoken about in
Mhm.
revered and respected tones. Even had a season in Las Vegas where he put up legitimate like wide receiver production. Like he
Yeah.
had a, I don't know, it was a 900-yard season, a 700-yard season, whatever it was. But like produced as a receiver. And that makes it really weird. Like I don't know if it's just like always the desire to find the younger, faster, quicker guy, and it just he doesn't fit into the plans anymore. But he is like he easily could have found himself in a, I don't even want to say Matthew Slater because he could have been more of a receiver than Matthew Slater ever was, but he could have easily found himself in a position, hell, in Buffalo. He easily could have been here through his entire career and simply been beloved by Sean McDermott the entire time.
I mean, that could be it, right? Like every team's going to have a different type of valuation on a guy like that. If he was in Buffalo 5 years ago, I mean, he would get the Taiwan Jones, Tyler Medikevich treatment, but probably more of a role.
Hell,
Traditionally,
he's more of a receiver than either of them were running back or linebacker.
Right, 100%.
Anyways, we'll see. I do think that he's. I'm comfortable saying I bet he's here the rest of his career, however long that lasts. I bet you he's a Buffalo Bill the rest of his career, and I don't think this is a 1-year stop.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. I mean, what more can you ask for, like in a fourth receiver?
Yeah,
like legit X role, and that gives you verticality and blocking, but also is a plus special teamer that has like great leadership traits and is always endeared by whatever team he's on. Like just like this what's happening in Buffalo happens every single year with Mack Hollins.
Yeah, that's that is as much of anything of what I meant about the confusion on why is he looking for it. Like so many things are so consistently positive. It is a little weird. Whatever. All right. So one final thing here, but before we get you out of here, give me one more thing that you're looking for in this game. We've talked wide receivers. We've talked linebackers. You brought up Keon Coleman. The one for me is one of the most positive elements coming into this season was the offensive line and was the depth of the offensive line and the fact that, hey, we had that finally working really well last year. I feel really good about it this year. I liked Lyle Collins. I like the development from, Vandemark and from, Alec Anderson and the depth pieces. I felt pretty good about it. I didn't really even see I like Cedric Van Granger and was curious, hey, is there even a path for him to get any snaps? And that was just a immediate given. I don't need to even spend time worrying about that. We have the offensive line. And then I watched that game against the Bears and was just consistently like, what the hell? Even things that threw me off. I'm never gonna be super excited about Osiris Torrance in space against a quick defensive tackle and moving his feet, but I don't normally see him blown off the ball backwards in run blocking. That was something he was really good at. I've seen that. I've seen him display that trait as a strong, straight ahead run blocker. I've seen David Edwards and Connor McGovern be able to combo block and hand off and get to the second level. There were just so many things where I was like, what the hell's going on? Why is this happening? Is that just a weird blip and a motivated Bears team? Or is that something that maybe scratched a little itch in the back of your mind on, hey, maybe we need to watch this more closely?
Well, I think first of all, I think it was a major benefit to the Bears that it was their second preseason game, right? I think that's worth noting compared to the Bills' first. And I felt that way watching the game live. And I'm not going to try to spin in any type of way, but I will say that when I got to the tape, it made me feel better. Not that I'm erasing execution errors, but it definitely felt like preseason game one, where maybe there was like timing. It felt like just like more timing stuff where you had first live game action reps with like McGovern and Edwards, and the way that they would double, maybe James Cook didn't feel it the same way. And then Spencer Brown is the polar, like maybe that picture looked a little bit different, and it was good for them to get that rep. And then you have other instances where the Bears started to do some like run stunts, and they overload a particular gap, and there's some exchanges that the Bills weren't ready to account for, and you get negative plays. And it felt like it was more just like timing and cohesion more than it was getting beat up. And I know that the Bills didn't game plan for the game, but I think if they would, I think they'd have been a little bit more equipped for some of those tendencies that would tell them, hey, this is our core run game. This is how we adjust on the fly. It felt very just, hey, this is our first game together. And you saw some of those timing and cohesion issues pop up. And I mean, we'll see what happens this week. What makes me nervous about Pittsburgh is, it was last year. Did the Bills play Pittsburgh in preseason last year? It was bad. Like that was a game.
It was last year or the year before, but there was one that was just a disaster.
Right. And
bad.
Josh Allen was just getting like literally rocked, like
Yes.
with pressure and stuff like that. And I remember the podcast I did after. I remember going on WGR and talking about pocket presence and not having good protection schemes and how that went. So I'm nervous about Pittsburgh because of that, because I think they will be aggressive in the game, but also it's an odd front defense, and there's always, I think the Bills are probably, they've been going against an even front defense pretty much all camp and preseason long. So you talk about just different looks that you're not accustomed to seeing. Here's an odd front defense. I'm nervous about that, to be honest with you, what it's going to look like.
Yeah. I'm curious where it goes. And again, like I said, I try not to be just dismissive and a homer of like, oh, don't worry, we have nothing to worry about. It was last year. It was last year's preseason where the Steelers just dominated the Bills. I think it was like 27-0, and there was 2 scores late.
Well, and this
looked like 27-15.
Steelers were preseason champs last year, right? Weren't they like unbelievable, mowing them down?
Yes.
I think they scored every time they touched the ball. Like,
their first team offense was 5 drives, 5 touchdowns. People were like skyrocketing the Kenny Pickett MVP ticket.
Right, it was
odds.
insane. Right.
So again, plenty of grains of salt to be taken. Obviously, you
grains.
go back as far as, I think the 4-year Super Bowl run of the Bills, I believe they went 1-15 in the preseason, if I remember correctly. Some 2-14, one of those two. So again, it's plenty of grains of salt to be. And the Chiefs looked horrible last week in the preseason. I'm pretty sure their season's going to be okay.
It's a real shame. Yeah.
Okay. All those things together here. I think there's plenty for us to watch, plenty of excitement to be taken from it. And can't thank you enough. This has been fantastic. Obviously, we have fun bringing you on, a couple times a year, but this was one where we were just kind of filling in a date and be like, yeah, let's get together here at this point, not expecting there to be legitimate breaking news the morning of the show. So, favorable timing for us to be able to have you on, and for anyone listening here who is living under a rock and not already subscribing to the Locked On Bills on YouTube, on podcast networks, everywhere you can go, you can check out in the show description here. Joe, let them know what your upcoming shows are here to get everybody ready for this season.
I appreciate that, Greg. Locked On Bills, daily podcast on the Bills. We're living in the news cycle, right? It's that time of year where it comes fast and furious. So we're doing that, and obviously getting ready for preseason games, recapping preseason games, studying tape, all that type of stuff. So excited to get into my regular season rhythm, which I really enjoy. Like, what's funny is by the end of the year, I'm very much like, okay, I'm ready for the off season. I'm ready for just like blank slate, do what I want to do. And then by the end of the off season, I'm like, God, give me my game week rhythm back. So I'm excited for it to be here and
filling time.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I love, I really do. Like, me, we talk about this all the time. I love it all, but like there is that itch of like, okay, my game week mode, I'm ready for it. So here we are. I think my 5th year, 6th year, something like that. So I'm excited.
That's right. So I know, Aaron and I talk all the time. We're regular listeners, and someone who enjoys the everydayers there with you all the time, being able to check out everything you do. All the very nice comments in the chat here. We appreciate you guys jumping in here, and we're very thankful to have Joe on with us. But thank you, Joe. We appreciate it. I am going to talk about some of my friends over at BetUS here and see if I can win some people some money, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Greg. Go Bills.
Appreciate it. All right, guys. So again, obviously always great to have Joe on. He's one of our favorite guests to be able to jump on, and we were very lucky to already have tonight set up as this was happening because, I wouldn't want anybody else on here with me short of Aaron to be able to talk through news like today with Matt Milano, and it makes it interesting to kind of talk through what we do with this information. And I won't lie, I was even thinking through, is there any way to connect the Matt Milano news to any particular play with our friends at BetUS? Obviously, we've told you before, we're very excited about our partnership with them. They're offering all kinds of good stuff here. 125% deposit match on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Fastest payouts in the business. Tons of fun options. And I actually played around beforehand looking to see, is there anything that kind of intrigues me or makes me want to go in there? And they haven't quite got into like the full sicko mode of like over-unders on tackles. I was looking for defensive props to see if there's anything I could find for, obviously Dorian Williams would be pretty crazy if somebody had a Dorian Williams over-under on props. But I was even looking like any Terrell Bernard stuff or anything else that's out there, and they haven't quite gone into that mode yet. So I was playing around looking at some of the different pieces here. We told you before about some of the things that we noticed for the over-unders, and producer Chris found a really interesting nugget that as I was going through, we were talking about the over-unders for Josh Allen specifically, and some of them were in his rushing touchdowns. And I was like, we'll go through and look at where it was. And I even shared it with some of the One Pass members in our Discord of like, wow, they have a really high over under for Josh Allen on his rushing touchdowns. And I was like, I can't believe it was at 9.5 and having it here. And we saw movement. They dropped back to 6.5 and have it back here at 9.5. There's just been a ton of movement in what his over under bets are. Josh Allen at 9.5 rushing touchdowns. He's only done that once in his 6-year career. It was last year, so I get why the line is high, but in 5 of his 6 seasons, he has had less than 9 or less touchdowns, most of them at 8, 7, and 6. I do think he's going to have a very nice season, but there's been a lot of talk about wanting to let other guys kind of carry the ball in those spots, less wear and tear. I think we still see some of the snow plow and the Buffalo shove going over the line in that quarterback sneak. I still think he's going to have as many rushing touchdowns as any, quarterback out there. But you're telling me right now that I can win $100 by him having 8 or 9 rushing touchdowns? That's a really interesting bet to me. So, again, the guys here at BetUS, it's super interesting to be able to go through. I played around with a handful of them and some of the different plays that are there. We're going to talk about some other ones as we go forward with some of the different options. I actually thought some of the lines for Dalton Kincaid were fairly interesting. I'm waiting for his receiving yardage one to come out. I know that they've had the receiving touchdowns. I'm going to look for it live on the show here. Receiving touchdowns, we do have, it's at 5.5. I think that's a fair number. I don't think that's anything crazy that I need to run for. Oh, they do have it. This is new. They have his over under at 800 receiving yards. Right now, you can go over with pretty good odds. I think 800 receiving yards is a really, really nice line. That actually makes me wonder. I'm going to go look. I bet you his receptions total is out there too now if they have that. So let's see if they have. Oh, not yet. They don't have the receptions out yet, but they added the receiving yards. 800 receiving yards for Dalton Kincaid, I think, is very, very doable with this new season. 800 receiving yards. You're talking about needing to have 47 yards a game. If he has just over 47 yards a game, he'll hit 800 receiving yards. Last year, the last 13 games of the year, those final 11 games of the season and the 2 playoff games, he was already on pace for over 900 yards. And it was on pace for 113 targets. He is, I think, going to be the number 1 target in this offense this year. So those are 2 that I like a lot. So go on over, check out our friends at BetUS. Again, fast payouts, super easy to work with, tons of fun things out here to be able to play around with. They have all kinds of different odds you can bet on of who's going to go 0-17, who's going to remain undefeated the longest, the division odds, all kinds of different fun stuff that you can play around and look for as we get back into football swing of things. And again, $125 deposit match on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. All kinds of different fun stuff to be able to look at it. We've talked about some of the win totals and some of the other things they have out there. Maybe those odds come down. People get nervous about Matt Milano. You can get even better odds on what it is. So we're really excited about the partnership with them this year and being able to have our show be powered by BetUS. Obviously, we're very excited as well about continuing to work with our friends at William Mattar and all the things that they do for us, being able to go together. They've been really, really good partners. And as we close out here, I want to share a message from Bill himself, as we're going to have him on the show coming up soon, which I'll share right after this.
If you've been in a car crash, you should know this. At William Mattar, there's no fee until we win. That means you don't pay us unless we win your case. If you're hurt in a car, call William Mattar, 444-4444.
So again, Bill's actually going to be going to the season opener on September 8th against Arizona in Buffalo. And that following Wednesday night on our preview show, heading into the Week 2 Miami game, we're actually going to have William Mattar on the show with us to talk about his takeaways from that opening game, his expectations for the season, and just have some fun. We've shared before all the different ads that his social media team gets him to do. He is such a good sport. He's a really fun guy and been a really, really good partner for us. So someone that we're excited to be associated with and being able to work with. Make sure that you check out all the fun things that they have going on here. Again, our show is sponsored by BetUS, Sportsbook and Casino. Please remember to gamble responsibly. We have a lot of fun with it. It's something that we enjoy very, very much, but it's important to do it responsibly and not to be reckless or to play around with money you can't afford to. But beyond there, I think it is a little fun to watch the games and have a little action on it. So if you can do so responsibly, do it with our friends at BetUS. But on behalf of our guest, Joe Marino, on behalf of my missing partner in crime, Aaron Quinn, who will be back with us next week, and our awesome producer, Chris Kepner, I am Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are